Now it's time to cross over to our OCR for global insight and an in-depth look at important developments in world affairs.
Thanks, Mark. It's time for Global Insights, where we speak to experts from around the world to hear their views on issues making headlines. The world's biggest tech show wrapped up over the weekend in Las Vegas. The Consumer Electronics Show this year was held on a slightly more muted note due to cancellations and concerns over the surge of the Omicron variant. But the annual exhibition generally sets the tone for major trends in tech for the rest of the year, generating a great amount of excitement and speculation leading up to the day of the opening. So to go over the hottest gadgets and concepts presented at CES in 2022, we connect with Gareth Beavis, Global Editor-in-Chief of Tech Radar. Very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Not a problem. Lovely to be here.
And it was a very exciting week last week, a very exciting weekend as the show wrapped up, and we got a sort of a sneak peek of all the tech developments that are going to be trending this year. And before we get to those developments, though, first of all, the atmosphere surrounding CES, there was a lot of scepticism and maybe some concerns over whether the exhibition this year would be what it was in previous years, as big names such as Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Mercedes-Benz, they dropped out last minute because of the Omicron situation. Well, how did you find CES this year? Do you think it was able to deliver and generate the same kind of buzz?
I think it's an interesting concept because CES is very much about being there in Las Vegas, experiencing the show, basically going through the halls and finding all these different curious pieces of technology, seeing what's new, seeing and working out what the trends are by being there and sort of feeling the buzz of what people are talking about. However, it's still the place where things are launched and keynotes happen. And as you can see by the images, that the halls were far, far, far more sparse than usual. It's 75% down on attendance compared to 2019. I spoke to people who are out there and they could see the carpet, which is a rare thing for Las Vegas, because usually you're crammed in because people are scurrying around trying to find the latest stuff. So there are certain brands not being there that are more about the cachet than anything else. So Microsoft, Google, Amazon, what they're announcing can be done by a press release, and what they show isn't necessarily on the floor itself. But there is a few other ones, Mercedes, BMW, who still did have a presence. It's just not to the same level that we expected. So I think if the cancellations or the worries had happened earlier in the year, perhaps around July, August, I think it would be a very different show. But it happened far too close for brands like Samsung, LG, Hyundai to pull out of their keynotes, and they just stream them virtually. So from our perspective, we were desperately sad not to be there, because it is where you go to meet people, to network, to make the contacts, to set your year, basically, to let companies know what you're about as a media agency too, and it helps really foster that relationship. But equally, I feel like we got the full effect of all the news and all the announcements. It's just a shame we couldn't try the stuff.
And of course, when you do go to the Las Vegas show, TV panels, they're pretty much the centerpiece of the event, with the dazzling displays just everywhere in the Samsung, LG booth, Sony. And this year it seems that it was all about the quantum dot quality. And first of all, could you explain what the QD OLED displays are all about and what you made of Sony's new TV?
Yeah, quantum dot OLED is the buzzword for this year. Luckily we got to see some of these displays beforehand in briefings and demonstrations, so we had a very good idea of what was happening in the TV space, because that's always the exciting part of CES. It's the new TVs, it's the displays, things people can get really excited about. It's where we saw curved displays for the first time. HD TV. This is where CES has made its name over the years. Quantum dot OLED. Now, quantum dot is popularized by Samsung over the years, and Samsung also is making the quantum dot OLED panel for Sony. It just depends how different manufacturers take those from Samsung Display and customize it themselves. Now, what quantum dot does, OLED displays are wonderful, and I've been tracking them for years, since I wrote for an OLED newsletter 15 years ago. And from the very inception of technology to now, it's been wonderful to see it grow. So an OLED display is emissive. So what you have with a normal LCD panel is a light behind, and then you basically put little colored gates in front of it that will show the different pixels. And that's the way that you get to see the images and the colors. Obviously, that can have things like light bleed through. Although the technology has evolved a lot over the years, it can still not look as high quality. With OLEDs, they're self-emissive, which means if it's off, it's completely black and it's off. If it's on, you just see the light, which is why you can get these really bright, really clear, really colorful displays. However, what they do is they create light out of basically placing one color on top of another one to try and make a different kind of white light, which doesn't necessarily always work in the same way. And what Quantum Dot does is uses a thin blue layer at the back and then places the colors on top of that. And what that allows the technology to do is to have up to 200% more brightness, control the colors more accurately, have a wider viewing angle because the colors aren't being locked off as badly. And so it basically can create a much more vivid, inky black, but very beautiful in terms of color display panels. And that's what's going to make the big difference this year.
Right, well, it was a bit disappointing that Samsung didn't unveil its own QD OLED TV, but well, when it does, though, what are you expecting to see, and what do you think it's going to have to do, really, to beat Sony's model?
Well, I mean, Samsung is obviously the largest TV manufacturer in the world, and we're as surprised as anybody else that Samsung didn't bring its own set out. There were rumors, even to the point of a Samsung set being announced on the innovation panel. So we were very much expecting it to turn up. So it's a curious thing that it hasn't, but we're expecting it very soon. I mean, Samsung hasn't actually got a very long history in the OLED TV market, very much for smartphones, but it's focused heavily on QLED. So this is obviously the next step for Samsung in the future. What Samsung can do, like I said, it only supplies the panels for Samsung display. Samsung Electronics obviously does some things very different. So they can work very well with audio, for instance. Samsung's very good at creating audio out of its speakers. It has tremendous marketing appeal and a connected ecosystem. So, Samsung smartphones are among the most popular in the world. People can connect those to their smartphone. It has a more robust interface, one might say. Sony uses Android TV, but Samsung's a lot more stripped back and clear. I think a combination of all those things together, plus the fact that it can be more aggressive on price, means that, the ability for Samsung to bring quality panels and do it in a way that the users resonate with is fairly likely.
I thought, of course, with LG, there was that the world's smallest OLED TV that they launched, and some other interesting features as well. What other TVs or features did you find quite eye-catching this year?
Well, we had large TVs. LG again did the 97-inch OLED. We had TCL doing a 98-inch TV with Roku on board. These are far more, I say, affordable. They're far more affordable than they were before, so under $10,000 US, which is it's still a huge amount of money. But for somebody who's desperate for these TVs that were just conceptual space age not very long ago, it's amazing to see them coming down so far. But we shouldn't overlook this idea of the 42-inch OLED. This is the first time we've seen this technology get down to this size. And as I mentioned, OLED is one of the most premium TV technologies out there. And for LG to be able to offer that at a smaller size with a lower cost means that more people will be able to enjoy it, especially in apartments where space is a premium. And 55-inch, 65-inch is not really possible. That's huge. We've also seen Samsung N900B 8K QLED TV. Again, very much a high-end TV that people who want the very best to have. This is going to push the boundaries again in terms of picture quality and imagery, and Samsung's been doing QLED for a very long time. It very much knows what it's doing in there and is able to do lots of things like figure out the foreground and the background more clearly, more responsive and sharp pixels. It takes all the advantages of LED TV and makes it better. One of the most interesting things I saw was the Panasonic LZ2000 OLED TV. Now, it's not the panel itself, although Panasonic does do very good OLED panels. It's the audio that it's offering. So it does this thing called directional audio. So it can actually focus the sound to different parts of the room. So, for instance, say there's a family watching TV and you want one person to have it up loud, but everyone else is going to be distracted. You can direct the audio so that while everyone can hear it, it won't be anywhere near as loud as that one person. Or you can direct it to a group of people. Or for those that are hard of hearing, they can have elevated volume compared to everybody else, and it won't need to be on a separate system or relay or a headset. And that's the kind of thing that I think is really exciting. It doesn't always have to be the TV display panel that's the key thing for a TV set.
Oh, and well, in addition to these dazzling displays and new audio systems, of course, we can't leave out mobility now because, well, CES has become something of a car show in recent years. And, well, which concept vehicles did you find interesting at this year's show?
I think mobility, electric vehicles, car concepts, as you mentioned, were a really key and exciting part of this year's show. There were so many different brands and key well-known brands doing interesting things. So Mercedes crossing the 1,000-kilometer range. There's a target they set themselves with their concept car, with the EQXX. They said, we wanted to find a way to make a car go this far. So they used technology from their Formula One workings. They made the car just one of the most drag efficient around. They used all the different technologies to try and make this concept car get to over 1,000 kilometers, but it's very close to road legal, which is the very exciting thing. BMW, as we saw with the iX Flow concept, where the car can change from white to black, is it's a gimmick in some ways. People can see that as when we're going to use that, but it does offer a lot of opportunity. People have been talking for years about cars that can alter the outside. People love customization, and where this will be used probably in the short term is maybe the front grille. For electric vehicles, don't need that grille for cooling the car necessarily, so they could use that for something else. It's basically real estate. And in the future, this could also be used to let the driver know how much charge is left in the car. You could use it to just customize your own the way that you want to drive the car. These things are really exciting. Sony was a surprise for us. We know Sony's already had the vision concept in the past, but Sony Mobility is now a new company, and we've got the very real possibility that we could see a Sony car on the road in the near future. Sony themselves are sort of exploring the possibility with the commercial viability, so it's a long way from being certain. But the Vision 02 concept with many sensors and the ability to see inside and outside the cockpit, again, it was very interesting. Sony presented this idea of using 5G to be able to connect to multiple users at once and to identify possible crashes in real time, to alert you that someone's coming down the freeway a different direction than where you're going. This will initiate a crash. They say they'll do that by things like messages, which seems a little bit dangerous, but we'll see how that pans out in real time. But there's lots of other interesting things, like the Chevrolet Equinox Ev, bringing that in $10,000 cheaper than Tesla. The companies now are really sticking it to Tesla and saying, right, you think you're the only EV manufacturer, we're coming for you, and we're going to expect you to step up. And that means that Tesla now needs the Model 2, this much vaunted cheap production car that that will take it out of the premium space and bring it into the more everyday user situation. So lots of exciting things, and we haven't even talked about LG's Omnipod concept, which was just bizarre and saw people in cinemas and working offices being driven around and having dresses appear out of the side pods. So less of a real life concept, but more of an exciting one.
And well, last year the words metaverse and NFT, they became part of our everyday language. Perhaps they've been overused in our everyday language in terms of media coverage. But well, how were these trends reflected at CES this year?
I mean, the metaverse it's bordering on nonsense at this point. It's just another word for the internet with virtual reality. And the reason that this is nonsense is because there isn't a metaverse. There's no such thing. A metaverse is just a connected set of people operating in a different way. And so all these companies, and there was a great Twitter user who was going through, and Nima Zagami, was going through and looking to sort of find all the different smaller companies that are talking about things like their metaverse. And he counted 15 alone, just talking about things that had no real notion of what this metaverse is. Obviously we've seen Meta, the company that was formerly Facebook, talking about it with Horizon World. That's one version of it. Samsung was showing off its own version of it with Zepeto as their own virtual world. But in reality, we saw lots of companies talking about the headsets that you can use and the ways that it can work. And arguably, Meta Mobility from Hyundai was the most realistic, where instead of your physical presence being used in a virtual world, it goes one step further, and you control robots, for instance, that are interacting in the real world. Whether that could be on Mars, walking around, and you can get the feeling from their sensors, so the wind or the atmosphere there and what it feels like under the feet. That's amazing. But in reality, lots of companies are talking up. It's not a real thing yet. And what we really need is a smaller brand to come through, maybe make really cheap hardware that's universally acceptable for lots of people. And it's just the thing that everyone piles in on. Second Life was a metaverse. You could argue that any multiplayer game is a metaverse. It just needs that level of understanding and people to all get on board and to want to be part of it for it to become the metaverse. But really, like I said, it's just the internet with virtual reality, and it needs a lot more.
We did indeed see a lot of companies just jumping on the bandwagon, though, with this word, and Samsung launching it, making customers able to buy NFTs on its platform, which, it's questionable how much people are going to actually get involved in that. But, well, another big part of CES are, of course, the robots and the very random gimmickry. We had even Arirang TV launching its own AI anchor based off our managing editor, Jennifer Moon. And there were, of course, other things like loo roll fetching robots and finger biting, finger nibbling furry pets and things like that. So what were some of your favorites that you saw this year?
I mean, you mentioned there the Amigami Ham Ham. It was an absolute favorite of the whole team. It's that idea of, the nibbling pet without actually being disgusting, covered in bacteria, and having to wash your hands afterwards. But everyone loved the idea of the cutesiness of it. There was loads of things, and this is really the benefit of being able to go to CES and to see these things. Because you mentioned there the Charmin robot that would go and deliver toilet roll when you needed it. The fundamental principle of that is that robots are now becoming able to do the things that people might need, to offer functions that weren't able previously. This year we saw things like robots that are able to, move things around for you properly. The idea being that there could be actual mobility robots that can help you move furniture or to do things like that in the real life. That's amazing. But there's also things like the Amica robot with facial features that were far more as you would expect from sci-fi movies like iRobot and previously. It starts to look like things like that, and it's quite eerie and bordering on creepy for some people. And to be told, oh, don't worry, it's 10 years away, for me is still a bit too close. 10 years is not long enough to be able to see those kind of things walking around in the street. But in terms of the day-to-day stuff that we were interested in, the Novito invisible headphones was by far the most popular story on Tech Radar. And it uses this idea of a soundbar that, again, similar to Panasonic, will offer directional waves, but this one will actually track your head, work out where your ears are, and direct your sounds into small pockets by your ears. So it sounds like you're wearing headphones without actually doing it. They truly are invisible. And by the same token, people around you within 1 meter will only be able to hear about 20% of the sound. So it's really cool to see that kind of thing. We had the smart dog collar from Invoxia, which would uses infrared sensors and radar to be able to look through your dog's skin, basically, to be able to check the respiration, heart rate. This hasn't been able to be done before. And for pet owners around the world who really need this kind of insight, who really want to find out if their pets are okay and their health, in the same way you might wear an Apple Watch or a Fitbit to check your own health, this is going to be game-changing for lots of people. And so this technology is great. We've already mentioned Hyundai, working with Boston Dynamics, the great things that are happening there. But also the 10 Minds pillow. This is one that will listen for you snoring during the night and will move your head around for you. The OO game Haptic vest, that was one that could make things like the metaverse if a connected situation did work. That sounds mildly scary because that allows you to feel things in the real world. So if you're in a game and you get shot, apparently you can feel the bullet going in and going out, and if you're bleeding, that dripping down at the same time. It sounds a little bit too visceral, but this is the kind of sort of next gen stuff that we're seeing there, which is it's really exciting.
Well, we could talk on and on for hours, and I really wish we could, but unfortunately this is where we have to wrap up this segment today. That was Gareth Beavis, Global Editor-in-Chief of Tech Radar. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.